So when I first moved to the Abbey to train as an anagarika, I used to wonder, is there a training manual for monastic life? Like, what is the curriculum? Where are our learning goals? How do we achieve them? Yeah, you can tell I used to be a school teacher. So some years later, I feel I found my answer in chapter 5 of Nagarjuna's Precious Garland of Advice for a King, which we had the good fortune to study with Venerable Children for almost 2 years or so. And this is a chapter that comes after Nagarjuna's been telling the king about how to run the kingdom in an ethical way. And I just love the beginning of chapter 5, or the end of chapter 4 going to chapter 5, where Nagarjuna tells the king, however, if you are unable to rule in accord with Dharma, because the world is opposed to Dharma, then for the sake of Dharma and glory, it makes sense for you to become a monastic. And reading this, I was like, yes, finally, I'm biased clearly. Yeah, because it is hard to try and run to be a political leader and try and be ethical, right? So I felt like this was sensible advice. So chapter 5 begins in this way. He tells the king, thereupon, as a monastic, you should first become serious about your training, focusing on the pratimoksha along with the Vinaya, and also on becoming learned and determining the meaning of what you study. Then you should eliminate those faults that are cited in the Skudra Vastuka, assiduously learn to recognize them, widely known to be 57 in number. So that's very clear, I guess, in 2 verses, where Nagarjuna tells monastics what our study program is. Right? We study the Vinaya, we study the Dharma and understand its meaning, and our core business is to learn to identify the afflictions. And he said, there are 57 as laid out in our Abhidhamma text. So some of us also studied these 57 faults with Dr. Jeffrey Hopkins. And back then he told us if we were his graduate students, he would ask us to write a 5-page paper on why Nagarjuna organized the 57 faults in their particular order. So today I just want to put forward the idea that if we read chapter 5 as a monastic training manual, then maybe these 57 faults are organized in terms of how they arise in different phases of our monastic life and spiritual practice. Just checking out the idea. So I would say the first 15 are really the greatest hindrances to any of us learning the Dharma. Yeah, and especially for monastics in community, this is the stuff that makes it hard for us to get along with our teacher, with other monastics. I mean, forget about taking instruction. Yeah, so let's just look at the list. The first 15 are wrath, rancor, concealment, hostility, dissimulation, pretension, jealousy, miserliness, non-integrity, inconsideration for others, haughtiness, fury, arrogance, heedlessness, and pride. So I was thinking, there you are when you take ordination, right? So sincere, generating like the best motivation you can imagine. Venerable, please give me the precepts. I want to give my life to the 3 jewels. Yes, yes. Yeah, you ordain. And then maybe give or take 2 weeks or so, what happens? Wrath, especially, I would think. You get angry. And, you wonder why, right? Because I think all of monastic life is set up to frustrate attachment. And when attachment gets frustrated, what happens? You get angry. Yeah, so that's just gonna come up big time. It's not like you are a bad person or whatever. I think it's because monastic life is working. And I remember very early on in my training, Venerable Jigme, who was my mentor, said to me, when you have gotten angry with every single member of the community, then maybe you will realize the problem is your own mind, not the community. I was like, oh, she's right. Did she read my mind? So sometimes I think talking to senior monastics about, stuff you will see along the way is just so helpful. It kind of just normalizes the whole experience. Yeah, we all have afflictions. This is going to come up. Then I think number 16 to 26, start to creep in when you've been ordained for a little while. Yeah, hypocrisy, right? Trying to look holy, like a good nun. And then the 5 wrong livelihoods for monastics are listed here, which is our sneaky attachment coming back. Yeah, you're just learning how to ask for what you want, but not directly, right? So through flattery, hinting, harassment, desire to acquire things through what has been acquired. And this one for sure, you need to live in the monastery for a while before you can get to carping, right? Where you just cannot let go of the spatula being in the wrong place. So I think all of us know each other's trips after a while. Like, yes, we're running the same complaint again, carping. You get stupefaction, boredom, discrimination of differences, so you're picking faults. You stop paying attention to your own mind and practice because you get complacent. And you lose respect. And here, especially losing respect for your teacher, because you live, especially if you live with your teacher, it's very easy for that ordinary mind to set in. And then I think number 27 to 35 perhaps come up when you've risen in seniority, maybe you've taken on leadership positions, maybe you're even asked to go out and teach, right? So that's when you run the risk of becoming a negative person. And here, negative person means someone who teaches the doctrine incorrectly. And that can be coupled with longing, obsession, avarice, unsuitable greed, lusting in opposition to Dharma, fraud, great desire, craving approval. When I looked at this set together, it's kind of terrifying, because you see that's what's happened with spiritual leaders of prominent organizations. So really, until we become Aryas, as Venerable tells us again and again, we have to stay vigilant, right? Just as long as you let this stuff fester in your mind, no matter what you look like on the outside, it's the afflictions that are going to run the show. And for us with untrained minds, power, faith, fame, material wealth are very dangerous. 36 to 40, I thought, is the stuff that can cause us to disrobe even well along the path, right? So non-fortitude, right? What Venerable Chuni was saying in her talk, I've had it, I just can't stand it anymore, for whatever it is that we're upset about. Not listening to our teacher, right? Impropriety, not heeding instructions. Right? Because, you've been ordained so long, I'm sure you can think for yourself now, and so forth, so you don't listen to your teacher. And I think really tricky is the conceptuality related to relatives and attachment to our country. And I think we saw that come up in the origin story of the first precept. That can really be there. Just the whole idea of, maybe I should really help my relatives by having a child, or maybe I should serve my tribe. So this stuff is just deeply ingrained and can come up anytime, as we can see with Venerable Sudina. It's very tricky. And I think if we survive so far as a monastic, we also have to watch out for 41 to 50, which I think are the more subtle and pervasive afflictions. So I'll just list them. Here, the notion that we won't die, the conceptuality concerning recognition, conceptuality in connection with infatuation, erratic displeasure, desiring union, lassitude, affect, physical sluggishness, extreme mental dejection. And I thought it was interesting at the very end, you have basically the 5 hindrances to developing concentration split into 7. So maybe it's like if you've studied and practiced a long time and you finally have the opportunity to do retreat to try and cultivate concentration, the 5 hindrances come up. So that was just one idea I had about this. But clearly I'm trying to just focus on these. Yeah, the most important core business of this life, really, working with those afflictions. And in case this list looks intimidating, when I prepared this whiteboard, people were like, what are you talking about? It looks scary, right? I think it reminds us when we look at the 57 faults of what Venerable talked about this morning about self-acceptance as a key part of our spiritual practice. All of us have these afflictions. There is no point trying to conceal that or pretend they're not there. The most important thing is to recognize them in ourselves and rejoice at the opportunity to see them and work with them slowly, one step at a time. Because that's the most hopeful part of, I think, of what the Buddha taught. When we recognize that we have ignorance and afflictions, there are methods to deal with them. Just a total side note, I was thinking about the story of Oedipus Rex, right, which is like the cornerstone of Western literature, where he discovers he is ignorant and falls into despair and blinds himself. I was like, what kind of solution is that, right? Like the Buddhist message is so different. You recognize you're ignorant and you go, oh wow, I can't believe I've followed the wrong teachings my whole life, and thank goodness I've met ones that work, and here they are, and we can put them into practice. Shoo! I don't have to blind myself and wander around physically and mentally blind. That's not the point at all. And as Venerable Chuni was pointing out, this is just the foundation for all the good stuff that comes later. Because later on in this chapter, Nagarjuna talks about the 6 perfections and also the 10 bodhisattva grounds. So, when someday we will be able to emanate bodies for the benefit of all beings. For now, we can work on the wrath and rancor and so forth for a start.